The story begins with Earth's Ranger Red battling an enemy known as the Exterminator King. Even though he was severely injured, Red vowed to protect the world. He left the rest of the fight to his teammates, who could only watch helplessly as Red sacrificed himself. As he was falling to his death, Red felt completely satisfied with the ending but was glad that he had given people hope and saved the world. Though he wished for more time with his team, he somehow landed on his head and miraculously looked fine. His injuries vanished and he found himself in an unfamiliar place. 6 months later, in a mansion, adventurers struggled to fight a monster golem. Eventually they gave up, and a woman named Idola called them failures. She then stopped the golem herself. The butler reminded Idola that the adventurers in front of them were only B-ranked. The adventurers protested and mocked Idola's fallen house for being unable to afford A-ranked adventurers. In response, Idola ordered her golem to drive out the rowdy adventurers. Afterwards, she swore to her father's portrait that she would reclaim the royal family's wand and prove that she was worthy of helping people with her magic. However, she needed a strong adventurer, and her biggest problem was her lack of money to hire one. The butler informed her that he had called over one more adventurer. This adventurer was also B-ranked, but the guild introduced him as someone who had climbed the ranks in just 6 months and was considered a promising rookie. However, Idola doubted that, given her experience with other spineless B-ranked adventurers. Suddenly, Idola's golem crashed in and a familiar face appeared telling her to run while he dealt with the golem. Idola quickly explained that it was her golem, created for testing purposes. The butler then revealed that this man was the adventurer he had mentioned. Red couldn't believe he was being tested right away, but Idola pointed out that Red had initiated the situation himself. He then activated his Bansho set to transform. Idola grew concerned upon hearing his strange incantation and noticing his odd bracelet. She couldn't sense any magic from either Red or his bracelet. She also found his transformation moves peculiar. Red then began transforming, shouting his lines as the Red Ranger while he turned into one. As expected of a Power Ranger, there was always an explosion effect behind him, which confused Idola. She had many questions like how Red transformed without magic, and why things randomly blew up. Idola reminded herself to stay calm and analyze the unknown when encountering it. Red then used the burning Kizuna punch. Idola thought the name was lame. Surprisingly, the golem exploded. Idola was puzzled since she hadn't put anything in the golem that would cause it to blow up. She became even more confused seeing Red dressed entirely in red. Red asked if he had passed, and Idola couldn't help but agree. He then formally introduced himself as Asagaki Tougo, also known as Red. Idola introduced herself and her butler, Poseidon. Before hiring Red, Idola decided to ask him a question. In one speech bubble, she asked about Red's entire existence. Red complained that it was too much for just one question. So, Idola shortened it and simply asked what Red was. Soon after, Idola was shocked to learn that Red came from another world. She somewhat accepted it since Red's powers didn't make sense in her world. Various historical books mentioned people from another world who had helped seal away the Demon Kings in the past. Now, an actual otherworlder stood before her, but she was puzzled by the strange red suit Red was wearing. Red explained that it was a popular outfit among kids. Idola became concerned that the kids might be getting brainwashed. She asked to proceed with her original request. Idola needed Red to collect mana metal from the ruins of Wakar. It was a mysterious new rare crystal that formed when the planet's crust released mana, and Idola wanted to study it. If she found it useful for practical magic applications, they could experiment with its uses. If it turned out to be dangerous, they should report it to the royal family immediately. As part of the Great Wizard family, she felt responsible. Red accepted the task as a mission to protect the bond between magic and people. Idola left Red to interpret it in his own way. She wanted to reclaim the position of the royal family's wand, so she knew she had to deliver decisive results and present them to the royal family. She needed to achieve these results no matter what. The group went outside, and Idola showed them the wyvern they would ride. However, Red ignored her and transformed instead, which caused the lawn to burn to ashes. Red then emphasized how important the research on mana metal was, and suggested his method to reach their destination faster than half a day. Out of nowhere, he brought out a turbo engine, shocking Idola and breaking her understanding of the world. Red grabbed her and jumped onto the turbo engine. The two flew faster than the wind, passing adventurers along the way. Meanwhile, Poseidon appeared and realized that his master was gone. At the ruins of Wakar, Red celebrated their arrival, as it only took 2 hours without encountering any monsters. However, Idola reminded him that they had actually passed through 3 large flying monsters. Red excitedly wanted to rush into the dungeon, but Idola asked for a break because she felt like she was losing her common sense. Soon after, the two explored the dungeon and encountered monsters along the way. Idola used her ice magic to defeat a high-level monster. However, she got distracted by Red's antics as his alter ego, Kizuna Red. He used his sword, Handshake Caliber, to defeat monsters and also had a handgun called Marriage Beam Gun with homing bullets. Idola wondered how many monsters Red had killed while she was busy with just one. She found his flashy and noisy weapons annoying. To finish things off, Red said his hero catchphrase, and an explosion occurred behind him, burning the drop materials to ashes. He remarked that the monsters were as strong as the Exterminator army's small fires. Idola wondered what kind of monsters Red had faced before. Red explained that the Exterminators were a secret society planning to take over the world, and he and his teammates fought to protect the bonds between people. Idola couldn't imagine the world Red came from. It had been half a year, and Red hoped his friends were doing well. Idola asked if Red had tried to find a way back home. Red shared that he had traveled from the Far East to the westernmost tip of the land. However, the world he ended up in was different from Earth, and he discovered that the people here were also facing many problems. Red then assumed that he had been sent to this world to protect it as Kizuna Red. Since he didn't know how to return home or why he was sent here, Red decided to help as much as he could and go on adventures, hoping to find a reason and a way back. Idola noticed how carefree Red was. Red then asked about Idola's dreams. Idola hesitated, realizing they were taking turns sharing their thoughts. Red insisted that talking about their dreams and goals was important since they were adventuring together. Eventually, Idola gave in and shared her dream of restoring her family's position as the royal family's wand. The wand was a title given to the top wizard who served the royal family, managing everything related to magic. Idola's family, the Avorns, had held this position for generations. They took great pride in researching magic and bringing happiness to the people. However, 10 years ago, Idola's father lost a duel that determined who would become the wand, and the Avorns were exiled. The current wand monopolized magic, using it only for the Knight Order and noble families, treating war and civilians as mere tools for selfish purposes. Idola couldn't forgive them and wanted to reclaim the role of the wand to bring happiness to the world again. That was her dream, and Red encouraged her to share it, even if it seemed childish. Red exclaimed that he wouldn't laugh since he had fallen in love. Idola was surprised when Red suddenly held her hands. Red had fallen in love with the goal of making everyone smile. At first, Idola misunderstood what Red meant, but his words truly made her feel vulnerable. Just then, some human skulls rolled over and only Idola noticed them. Red was distracted by something else. They followed a bright light and discovered a lot of mana metals. Red grabbed one and exclaimed that they should make many trips back and forth. However, Idola found it odd because the mana metal should have formed a frozen water fountain shape if it came from the Earth's crust. The mana metal in front of them looked like someone had collected it. Suddenly, a huge dragon appeared and Red protected Idola. Red bled a lot and both were sent flying. Idola couldn't believe that an ancient dragon had been gathering the mana metal. Red then realized that the human remains were actually the dragon's snacks. Idola tried to stop Red from fighting. Red, however, wanted to defeat the dragon for the mana metals. Idola asked him to stop, saying she didn't want anyone to die for her dream and suggested they retreat. Red looked back at her and told Idola that he had fallen in love with her dream. He knew she would achieve it and bring smiles to everyone's faces. He then began his transformation, exclaiming that it was his duty to protect Idola and her dreams. However, Idola stood behind Red as he transformed. She ended up getting blown away by the special effects explosion. Idola complained that she was almost killed and suggested Red check if someone was behind him before transforming, but she also asked how Red planned to defeat such a monster. Red claimed it was all or nothing and decided to use his strongest technique. However, to use it, he needed a partner with whom he had a strong bond, so he asked Idola for help. Idola pointed out they had only known each other for half a day, but Red reminded her how they had shared their dreams. He was confident that their friendship would lead the way and reached out for Idola's hand. With no other choice, Idola held hands with Red. Red summoned the Kizuna beasts and, as expected, they each transformed into parts of a robot and combined together. The maximum Kizuna Kaiser appeared to battle the ancient dragon. Idola's mind struggled to keep up with the chaos. While they were fighting the dragon, Red asked Idola if she was okay. Idola, confused, asked what Red had summoned. Red calmly explained that it was the miraculous formation of all the Kizuna beasts, typically used at the climax of a battle. Essentially, it was the strongest weapon of the Kizuna 5. However, the dragon's powerful slap caused maximum Kizuna Kaiser to start losing the fight. Red then realized that having only 2 people inside the robot limited its energy, and it could only operate for another 20 seconds. Idola began to worry that they might not be able to defeat the dragon. Red then hugged Idola and used the powerful move, the exploding supernova of dreams, Maximum Kizuna Buster. With that shot, the dragon was shredded to pieces, and the blast even pierced through mountains. Red declared that their bonds had triumphed. Meanwhile, Idola began to feel scared of otherworldly weapons. A few days later, Idola and Poseidon met with Red at the Adventurers Guild. Idola explained that her research was progressing slowly. Red then asked if Idola had another request. To his surprise, Idola expressed a desire to become an adventurer and wanted to form a party with Red. Red was pleased because he had been struggling to find others to join his party. Idola mentioned that the issue was Red burning the drops. Curious, Red asked why Idola wanted to become an adventurer. Idola said she needed to observe Red's powers because she believed that combining his powers from another world with her world's magic could create a new type of magic, such as interdimensional transfer magic. She hoped to regain her role as the wand by creating such magic, fulfilling her dream while also helping someone return home. Throughout this, Red remained silent, prompting Idola to ask for his reaction. Red then exclaimed how moved he was and suggested that he might have been sent to her world just to meet her. As he spoke, it sounded to everyone around them like he was confessing his love to Idola. Poseidon noticed that her master's face was turning as Red's suit. Despite Red transforming into something different, Idola noticed that Red still had the same body appearance and structure as the humans in her world. After a quick check, she found that the only major difference was Red's lack of magic. Idola wanted to test Red's blood, but he suddenly prepared to transform, as he hated needles. He exclaimed that while he was ready for any injuries in battle, he wouldn't tolerate injections. Just then, the guildmaster appeared to stop the commotion and found the two of them on top of each other. Shortly after, Idola received her status tag from the guildmaster. He taught her how to check it, and it was her first time seeing her status window. She had high intelligence and magic stats, which confirmed her connection to the Avorn household. Red was impressed by Idola's mage-like status. Curious, Idola wanted to see Red's status, hoping it might reveal some clues about his powers according to her world's standards. However, instead of the usual stats, Red's status displayed things like punching, kicking, jumping abilities, running speed, and even his signature move. It even showed a photo of him transforming and defeating an Ender from Earth. Idola couldn't help but curse since it wasn't a typical status window and didn't even list Red's skills. She wondered what the point was of adding the images. She had been ready to see some unknown skills, but the format was entirely different. Just then, familiar faces barged in and started mocking Idola for becoming an adventurer. Idola couldn't remember them until they reminded her about the golem test. She apologized, explaining that she couldn't recall every adventurer she met, except for Red, who had left an impression after that. The adventurers kept bad-mouthing her and warned Red not to work with her. Red admitted that Idola could be haughty and impulsive, but he also said she was kind and was trying to develop a new type of magic for him. He claimed she wasn't as bad as they thought. The adventurers laughed and pointed out that Idola was the cowardly wizard's daughter. They mentioned how the royal family's wand fled from the royal palace after a defeat. Idola then had a quick flashback of her father's words, telling her to keep working on their goals despite losing their title. Despite her father's encouraging words, people continued to look down on him and assumed his daughter would be the same. Idola glared at the adventurers and ordered them not to insult her father. They were surprised to see a rookie standing up to high rankers. Idola reminded them that they, the high rankers, couldn't even defeat her golem. She claimed she would surpass them easily in no time and called them third-rate adventurers. The situation had escalated, and Red appeared between them. He asked them not to fight and reminded them that they were adventurers. He suggested they settle things by doing a quest. Shortly after, the four of them arrived in front of a dungeon, and Red proposed a race to see who would defeat the mysterious monster inside first. Idola told the adventurers that if she won, they had to apologize for their insults, and if she lost, she would do anything they asked. The two adventurers were confident because the place was their usual hunting ground. They had already started imagining what they would do to Idola if they won. Seeing their reaction, Idola assumed that the two were familiar with the place. She and Red could win through sheer strength, but their opponents knew the geography well. She then motivated Red and the two teams entered the dungeon. The two adventurers planned to move quietly to avoid dangerous monsters like the Minotaur. However, their plan was ruined by Red, who transformed with the usual explosion behind him. The two adventurers were shocked and confused, unlike Idola, who knew what would happen and hid safely. Just then, the whole place shook as a herd of Minotaurs appeared, disturbed by the sound of the explosion. Everyone panicked because of the number of monsters, except for Red, who calmly brought out his turbo engine and started kicking the huge creatures. He exclaimed that he was already used to being surrounded by many enemies. Idola suggested bringing out the maximum Kizuna Kaiser. Red agreed and called out the Kizuna beasts. However, after docking, the maximum Kizuna Kaiser got stuck in the cramped cave. Red exclaimed how useless the maximum Kizuna Kaiser was at that moment. Idola noted that it still managed to take out quite a few enemies. Red then decided to get out and fight instead. The other two adventurers got distracted and monsters appeared behind them. Fortunately, Idola noticed the monsters and easily took them down with water magic. The adventurers were surprised they were saved. Idola exclaimed that she wouldn't save anyone who insulted her father. Despite losing his position and facing insults, Idola's father continued researching magic until his last breath for the sake of the people. She didn't want others to die in front of her because it would tarnish the duty she inherited from her father. That was why she didn't hesitate to save others, even if she found them extremely annoying. On top of that, she would be troubled if the two adventurers died before they could take back their insults. The adventurers found nothing cute about her, but Idola didn't care at all. Red then joined the conversation and called Idola a beauty rather than cute. Idola was flustered and started stuttering her words while blushing. The adventurers asked the two to stop flirting. Suddenly, a huge, creepy-looking monster appeared, searching for its treasure. The four were surprised by the appearance of something so unusual. They soon realized that it was the mysterious monster from the reports, something that hadn't been recorded yet. Suddenly, the Minotaurs got scared and ran away. Red told Idola to step back because the monster gave off the vibe of a secret society boss. Two adventurers called Red and Idola cowards as they charged toward the mysterious monster. The monster got angry and with one attack broke the two adventurers' swords. Red noticed things were getting worse as the monster was about to strike and kill the adventurers. Red punched the monster and saved the two. He felt the monster's hard skin with his punch but still managed to take it down. Feeling the numbness in his arm, Red remembered the Ender's rejection ender, a barrier. Idola wanted to ask more about it but first asked if there were any countermeasures against the monster. Red then brought out his victory Kizuna Buster, which was powered by the hearts of the users and fired the gathered Kizuna energy. Idola knew what would happen next. Red then asked the other adventurers for their strength. Idola doubted the two would help, but the adventurers were all willing. Red found it a shame that they couldn't conclude the duel properly, but they needed to defeat the monster. Idola had no choice and agreed. The four of them held the victory Kizuna Buster together and fired it at the mysterious monster. Some of them thought it might shoot a V-shaped beam since it was called Victory. However, Red said the shot was a failure. The monster then started to fight back. Red blamed the grudges they held against each other, which made the Kizuna energy reject them and split the beam in half. Idola couldn't believe Red was fighting with an unstable system. Red stopped the monster's fist, but he was already feeling tired after using his Kizuna energy for the Kizuna Kaiser and Victory Kizuna Buster. The monster overpowered him and he burst into flames. He told Idola to take everyone and run away. Idola ran to Red to heal him. The monster tried to crush them, but two adventurers stepped in to help. Idola asked what they were doing, and the two adventurers said they were returning the favor. They agreed that they couldn't defeat the monster on their own and needed Red and his mysterious power to win. They urged her to hurry and heal Red even if their chances were slim. They also explained how hard they had worked to become what they were now, even though they considered themselves third-rate. Idola began recalling her harsh words toward them. She realized she had been judgmental, just like the people she despised. Afterward, she started healing Red. The monster roared and charged at Red and Idola. They were almost within the monster's grasp when Red's Bansho set suddenly activated. Red stopped the monster with just his fist. He said he felt something and then blew the monster away. He exclaimed that he could already feel the grudges fading and that they were starting to accept each other. With a renewed sense of connection, Red transformed once more. He asked for everyone's strength again. Together, they held the Kizuna Buster and successfully delivered a killing blow. The monster exploded, and Red and the others struck a victory pose like the Power Rangers. Idola and the two adventurers were confused about when they had even struck the poses. After the battle, they wondered what the monster was. They also noticed an old man lying where the monster had been. They decided to bring the old man back for treatment. Idola then noticed a mark on the old man's forehead. Later at the Adventurers Guild, it seemed like both sides had already made up as they wished each other luck. However, before leaving, the two adventurers continued to tease Idola and even joked about her not running out of love for Red. Red was happy they became friends with them, but Idola wasn't so sure. For the first time, Idola saw someone in a different way and it didn't feel too bad. Red then exclaimed that humans could take on any challenge. Hearing this, Idola suggested that Red should try something like facing his fear of needles. Red immediately panicked and caused a mess in the Adventurers Guild. He still couldn't handle needles and the guildmaster scolded them again. Meanwhile, the old man from earlier escaped the infirmary and wandered the streets. Two people found him as he began to transform into a monster. The monster tried to run, but the two confronted it. The knight then used his sword to cut the monster into pieces. They retrieved the dangerous seed from the old man's forehead, used a special release technique, and left him lying in the street. The little girl and the knight realized they weren't enough to save the world on their own. Soon after, Idola returned home with Red. Poseidon asked Red what he needed, and Red announced that he would start living in the mansion. Poseidon was shocked and went to Idola to confirm this. Idola explained that Red often messed up his quests with unnecessary explosions. Since the mansion had many empty rooms and Red was a subject for research, Idola decided to let him stay. Poseidon reminded her that Red was a man, but Idola pointed out that she had been living with Poseidon for a long time too. Poseidon then mentioned that he had served as the house butler for generations, and saw Idola as his granddaughter. He was only worried that Red's inner desires might go wild because of Idola's attractive figure. Idola couldn't believe Poseidon was calling his so-called granddaughter voluptuous. She then blushed, insisting that Red wasn't that kind of person, though she remembered some of Red's misleading words. Still, there was a small doubt knowing she was attractive in Red's eyes. Poseidon approached Red and asked for a favor since he would be staying with them. Red told the butler to ask for anything. Without hesitation, Poseidon asked if he could castrate Red, explaining it was his duty to protect Idola's purity. Just then, Idola rushed in to save Red. Suddenly the door opened and a familiar face appeared. The two guests found Idola and Red on top of each other. The girl named Teltina was surprised to see them being so enthusiastic in the middle of the day. In the end, Poseidon was kicked out as punishment. Teltina then introduced herself as the third princess of the Avalost Empire, and the man with her as her attendant, the hero Rosie Mist. Rosie unsheathed his sword, intending to punish Idola and Red with death for showing Teltina such an unsightly scene. But Teltina smacked Rosie on the head and told him it was their fault for barging in without permission. She reminded him to be kinder and more tolerant since he was the people's beloved hero. Rosie, using his handsome face, declared that his love was only for Teltina, and that he didn't care about anyone else. Seeing the hero and princess in their own world, Red called them strange. Idola gave him a weird look, thinking he was one to talk. Teltina then got back to the main topic. She brought out a bottle and a familiar seed, asking Idola to analyze it. The seed reminded Idola of the old man's pimple, and she shared how they had defeated a mysterious monster recently. Teltina just learned that Idola had actually defeated it first. Idola tried to correct her by saying it was Red's doing, but Red interrupted, exclaiming that it was their bonds and the victory Kizuna Buster that brought them victory. Teltina asked about the victory Kizuna Buster, but Idola scolded Red for talking casually to the princess and told him to be quiet because he was making things worse. Teltina then praised Idola for creating magic strong enough to defeat a powerful monster. She assumed Idola could also figure out the mystery of the seed of magic. Teltina explained that when someone implanted the seed into a person, it greatly amplified their magic. It granted them special magic that could fulfill their wishes, allowing them to use something called privilege-type magic. When Idola asked how this was different from normal magic, Teltina gave examples. If someone wished for gold, they would gain the ability to turn anything they touched into gold. If someone wanted to protect their treasure, they could create a barrier. These unreal powers were granted by the seed of magic. Idola agreed that it was strange for someone who didn't train in magic to quickly obtain it, and if that was true, it would be groundbreaking. However, Teltina hinted that such an amazing thing likely had a dark side. When the seed developed and surpassed the host's power, it would take over the host's body and turn them into grotesque monsters. Red and Idola then realized that the old man was possessed by the seed. Idola suggested that the royal family should do something to ban it. Teltina then started to sweat nervously and revealed that the current royal family's wand, Shauha, was involved, which shocked Idola. Teltina didn't have solid proof yet, but the seed was definitely something traded among the nobles for a price. Moreover, since they controlled the magical tools of the country, Shauha could likely create something like the seed. Red suggested stopping it immediately, but Teltina explained that Shauha had the support of the nobles and royals. Someone with low influence like her would be quickly disposed of. She also shared how the nobles were drunk on power and causing the people to suffer. She was determined to stop the problem, even if it meant waging war against Shauha or the royals. She asked for Idola's help because she knew Idola could surpass Shauha as the descendant of the former wand of the royal family. Idola took Teltina's hands and said she couldn't ignore the issue anymore. They both agreed to fight together. Idola thought it was the perfect time to defeat Shauha and gain favor with the royals. Suddenly, Red offered to help, and Idola expected him to be eager about it. Teltina quickly accepted Red's offer since she currently had few allies. However, Rosie stopped Teltina and pointed his sword at Red, declaring that he wouldn't allow a disrespectful man to accompany his beloved Teltina. Idola criticized Red for his foolish words. Teltina then asked Rosie to be honest. Rosie admitted he didn't want anyone else interfering in his journey with Teltina, and insisted that he alone was enough to be Teltina's sword. Red realized that others saw him as a burden. Idola pointed out that his rude behavior was part of the problem. Red then suggested that he could prove his power was necessary, and Rosie exclaimed that it would be easy to defeat him. The two went outside to fight. Teltina was worried about Red since Rosie was an S-ranked hero known as the Demon Swordsman, who had taken down several high-bounty targets in the past. His sword was the same one that had sealed the Demon King before. Currently, he was the strongest swordsman with the strongest sword, and no one in the world could defeat him. Idola sighed, noting that only people from this world couldn't beat Rosie. Red transformed, saying he would work with Teltina if he won. Rosie got angry when he heard Red talk casually about Teltina. Red transformed and clashed with Rosie. As expected, there was the usual background explosion. Rosie called Red a clown for wearing such a suit and causing a flashy explosion. Idola was shocked that Rosie wasn't surprised by Red's strange transformation. On the other hand, Teltina was surprisingly excited. Rosie and Red kept clashing, and Red realized how strong Rosie was, even stronger than the Enders. Rosie noticed that Red could fight well, so he decided to bring out his sacred sword's second form, which changed both the form and element of the sword. Red thought the transformation was cool and wanted to show off something too. He decided to go all out and summon the Kizuna beasts. Rosie was shocked to see 5 large beast-type golems. Red didn't hold back and combined the Kizuna beasts into the maximum Kizuna Kaiser. Rosie was stunned as he faced the giant golem standing before him. The difference in size was surprising, and Idola hinted that Red might have gone too far. Teltina, who was brought inside the maximum Kizuna Kaiser, excitedly asked Idola what the golem was. Idola was shocked and wondered why Teltina was with them, since only those with bonds of friendship could enter the maximum Kizuna Kaiser. Red explained to Idola that Teltina shared her goals with them, and that alone created a bond. Idola couldn't help but think that the Kizuna system had a lot of loopholes. Teltina called out to Rosie, saying the view was nice from above. Rosie thought Red had taken Teltina hostage. Red tried to explain, but Rosie, burning with anger, flew toward the maximum Kizuna Kaiser. With all his strength and screaming at the top of his lungs, he slashed the maximum Kizuna Kaiser with his sword, and the huge robot was pushed back. Because Rosie was small, the maximum Kizuna Kaiser couldn't hit him. Rosie was determined to save Teltina. Red was impressed by the strong bond between the princess and the hero. He felt more inclined to join their adventure. Red then brought out the great Kizuna sword. Rosie shouted that something so big couldn't hit him. Instead of slashing, Red used the massive sword to create a gust of wind that blew Rosie away. Rosie's face was blown back like clothes in the wind, and he was sent flying. Idola hoped Rosie wouldn't die from that, and Teltina called out to him. Red then flew the maximum Kizuna Kaiser to retrieve Rosie, who realized it might be a really bad idea to travel with someone as strange as Red. Teltina reminded Rosie about the bet, but Rosie still refused to accept Red. Teltina then suggested they think from a different perspective. They couldn't let someone with strange powers do whatever he wanted. Rosie and Idola agreed. Teltina said it would help them feel more at ease if they kept Red as an ally. In the end, Rosie accepted Red as an ally but made it clear that he wouldn't let Red take advantage of him. Red just laughed, which left Idola confused. Red then said that Rosie's words sounded like those of someone who would become a good friend. The next day, the group decided to leave, and Idola entrusted the mansion to Poseidon. Idola felt bad that Red couldn't stay at the mansion, but it was also a relief since Poseidon wouldn't have the chance to castrate Red anymore. Teltina then opened a map showing the locations where the seeds of magic were held by the nobles. Since Acarina town was nearby, Red suggested they go there first. Rosie, using Red's full name, told him not to make decisions on his own. Feeling the tension between them, Red asked Rosie to call him by his nickname as Teltina did. Teltina then admitted it was the first time she had ever called a man by his nickname. Rosie suddenly felt jealous, as Teltina had never called him by a nickname before. Seeing how rowdy her teammates were, Idola began to worry about their upcoming adventures. The newly formed group soon reached the busy city of Acarina, where various people and jobs came and went. However, when they arrived, they were surprised that the town's atmosphere was different from what they had heard. They tried to talk to the townspeople and ask about the feudal lord, but they were rejected. Red declared that he wouldn't give up on forming connections with the townspeople. Idola reminded him that their main goal was to gather information about the seeds of magic. Rosie then pointed out that the people seemed scared. Teltina assumed the feudal lord had done something to make them anxious. A person then warned them to stay away from the feudal lord, and told them that residents were forbidden by law to talk to outsiders. She suggested they leave the city as soon as possible before disappearing into the alley. Teltina assumed there would be a severe punishment for breaking the law, but as long as no one saw them talking, there wouldn't be a problem. Idola then mentioned that a magic field was covering the entire town, likely monitoring the residents. Red was surprised that magic could do that, and Idola explained it was possible with the magic power of an expert wizard. She believed the magic barrier was the feudal lord's special kind of magic. Assuming the feudal lord was involved with the magic seeds, Idola suspected the feudal lord was up to something bad. At that moment, a creepy voice warned them not to speak badly of the feudal lord, and a humanoid monster appeared. It attacked Idola, but Red managed to save her. Idola then realized that the feudal lord's special magic had other abilities besides just monitoring. An old man's voice asked Idola how she knew such a thing. The old man was Lurgwat, the feudal lord of Acarina, responsible for keeping the city peaceful and orderly. Teltina then introduced herself and demanded that he stop oppressing the people and destroy the magic seeds immediately. Idola, Red, and Rosie looked proud. Lurgwat claimed he was only maintaining order and peace in a lawless city. Red argued that Lurgwat was threatening them, but Lurgwat said he was just guiding the people, as most of them were strays who couldn't find paradise. He claimed he was only placing thorns on the sides so people wouldn't stray off the right path. Red angrily told him to look around and see that the people were afraid of the thorns he mentioned. If Lurgwat truly wanted to guide them, Red suggested that he should hold their hands and walk with them. Teltina agreed, but Lurgwat insisted that the people who followed the law were living modest and healthy lives. With a creepy smile, he claimed that was the paradise everyone was aiming for. Red couldn't hold back any longer and activated his Bansu set. He exclaimed that Lurgwat only wanted to create a small garden where everything would follow his commands. Holding a seed in his hand, Lurgwat claimed that young people with shallow thinking wouldn't understand the principles behind his city. The creepy monster from before then warned them not to defy the feudal lord. Red fought back with a spinning back kick, but the monster vanished. It reappeared behind Red and struck him hard. Red couldn't defend himself as the monster kept disappearing and reappearing behind him, attacking each time. As she analyzed the fight, Idola assumed that the feudal lord's magic was compound magic. One part of it covered the entire city with a magic barrier that detected anyone who broke the law, while the other part summoned familiars to punish the offenders. Lurgwat declared that judgment would be brought down until peace was restored. Idola realized that Lurgwat was spotting Red's blind spots through the magic barrier and repeatedly summoning his familiars to attack him. She understood that Lurgwat had an abnormal amount of mana to keep summoning his familiars and a complex technique to control his magic. Now she saw just how powerful the magic seed and privilege type magic were. Teltina asked Rosie to help Red. Rosie suggested using Red as a decoy while they looked for Lurgwat's weakness. Teltina told Rosie to be honest, and Rosie admitted that she enjoyed seeing Red suffer. Teltina begged Rosie to help Red immediately. Meanwhile, Red struggled to find the right moment to attack Lurgwat. Suddenly, smoke filled the area, and Lurgwat thought that some people he knew had arrived. In another part of town, Red thanked the woman who had saved them. She was also the one who had warned them earlier. She led them to the hideout of the resistance group, who were trying to take back the city from Lurgwat. Teltina worried that the resistance might be punished, but the woman explained that Lurgwat's magic only worked within the city walls. She introduced herself as Grossa, the leader of the resistance, and then asked why they were fighting the feudal lord. Grossa and her team learned that Teltina wanted to get the magic seeds. She quickly offered to help, and Red expressed his gratitude. Grossa responded by saying they needed more power to stand against the feudal lord. Rosie asked why they were so determined to take back the city when they could simply move to another one. Grossa agreed that moving might be easier, but they all loved their city. It was a diverse and busy place that they cherished. They just wanted to reclaim their hometown. Hearing Grossa's longing for the place she loved made Red think of his teammates from the Kizuna Rangers. Idola understood how Red felt. Red knew the sadness of not being able to return to one's hometown. He understood Grossa's feelings and promised to help them take back the city from Lurgwat. Idola wondered how they could fight against a privilege-type magic, especially after seeing how Red struggled against Lurgwat. Rosie laughed out loud, mocking Red. Grossa then showed a document listing the laws that Lurgwat had imposed on the city, which they couldn't break while inside. Red suggested using Kizuna Kaiser to attack from outside the city, but Idola pointed out that this would reduce the city to ashes. Since the feudal lord's mansion was in the middle of the city, normal attacks wouldn't reach it. A night attack was also impossible because the magic barrier worked around the clock. Red suggested using Kizuna Kaiser again to destroy the mansion, but this would still destroy the city, and Lurgwat's familiars would just beat Red up again inside the city. Idola then mentioned she had an idea, but it would be a difficult plan to carry out. Soon after, Red and Rosie stood in fighting stances, their backs facing each other. Teltina understood that this approach would help them cover each other's blind spots. However, Idola pointed out several problems. First, Rosie was unwilling to team up with Red. Second, Rosie might get caught in Red's explosions during transformations. Third, the two couldn't cooperate well. Idola asked them to improve, but they insisted they were already doing their best. Like a caring mother, Teltina calmly asked Rosie to act like an adult since he was one. Rosie tried to make excuses, but Teltina whispered in his ear and promised to reward him with ear cleaning and a lap pillow. Later on, Rosie successfully completed the cooperative training with Red. That night, while taking a bath, Idola asked Teltina about her relationship with Rosie. However, Teltina was more curious about the connection between Idola and Red. She grew excited since it was her first time spending time in a bath with someone her age, as there was only a 1-year difference between them. Idola stared at Teltina for a long time, prompting the princess to ask what was wrong. Idola responded that she couldn't believe they were the same age after seeing Teltina's beauty. Teltina returned the compliment after noticing Idola's floating balloons. Idola then asked why Teltina chose her as a companion when there were more talented wizards in the capital. Teltina confessed that she specifically wanted to meet Idola. Even after the previous head of Idola's family passed away, Idola continued sending reports to the royal palace. These documents contained designs that could improve people's lives, as well as research and reports about which potion combinations were dangerous to mix. Teltina was moved by Idola's passion and perseverance to help others. She wanted to meet the girl her age who had such a strong sense of purpose in life. Idola felt touched that Teltina herself read her reports. However, after meeting Idola in person, Teltina still wondered if they were really the same age. Teltina got out of the bath first and met Red on the way. Red was planning to wash up after his sweaty training. However, Idola was still in the bath. Teltina decided to be mischievous and told Red that no one was using the bath. Red was happy to hear that. But before going ahead, Red seriously asked if Teltina would really stay with them until they reached the mansion. Teltina said she had her own mission to complete. When Red asked what it was, Teltina said it was a secret. Red assumed it was something only a princess could do. He was curious because he saw a princess like her going on a dangerous mission by herself. Teltina mentioned that it was the same as Red, who had died alongside the enemy to save the world. She asked why Red fought alone but figured it was because he was ready to die and didn't want to involve anyone else. Teltina said she was willing to be a sacrifice to keep others from getting hurt. Red quickly responded that he had no intention of dying at all. Teltina knew that and she felt the same way. She admitted that she didn't want to sacrifice herself on their journey. Because of that, she asked Red to protect her and her world as a hero from another world. In a nearby tree, Rosie listened to the conversation between Red and his beloved Teltina. Obsessed with Teltina, Rosie silently cursed Red and then sneaked into the bath to steal something from Red's pocket. Red believed he was the only hero. The next day, the girls wished the boys good luck. Red and Rosie then confronted Lurgot and his familiars. Red proudly announced they had a secret plan and tried to transform, but his plate to activate his Bansu set was missing. Rosie coldly watched as Red panicked. Lurgot's creatures then attacked Red because they were causing a disturbance in front of the feudal lord's mansion. Red was thrown aside, and Rosie declared that someone like Red and his connections were not needed in his world. In a memory from the past, a girl with silver hair told Red that having a bond was like holding a sword. It was something reliable, but if they couldn't handle it, they would end up hurt. If there were many bonds, they could manage, but leaving one unattended for too long would cause it to wither away. Once they grabbed it, they would be afraid to let it go. She said Red was like that because she couldn't stand being alone. Red then woke up coughing up water. He thanked Idola for saving him as he had seen his past flashing before his eyes. He noticed Idola looking shy and turning away. Covering her mouth, Idola explained she had to do something when someone stopped breathing. Red changed the subject and started looking for Rosie and Teltina. Idola became upset because her first time was brushed aside. However, Red misunderstood, thinking she meant it was her first time saving him, though she had already done it many times before. Meanwhile, Teltina went to Rosie alone and told her that Idola had gone to save Red. She said the plan had failed and suggested retreating, but Rosie assured her it was not a problem. He killed the familiars with one strike and reminded Teltina that he was her hero. Lurgot then summoned more familiars, but Rosie easily defeated the new group, saying he had already memorized their moves and positions. Teltina could see that Rosie was doing well with the transforming power of the sacred sword. Lurgot finally realized that Rosie was the hero chosen by the sacred sword after thousands of years. 2 years earlier, Rosie was known as the strong magicless adventurer, and Teltina had asked him to become the hero because she believed he had the qualities of one. Rosie insisted he was not because he didn't have any magic. Teltina then explained that this was the most important trait. She revealed that the sacred sword was actually the fusion of 7 holy swords, and one of them had the ability to absorb magic power to compensate for its enormous magic consumption. Since it always absorbs magic power, anyone holding it would faint. In this world, where almost every living being had magic, someone without magic would be able to wield it. However, Rosie didn't want to become a hero because he had a harsh childhood as someone without magic, seen as an abomination. He claimed he didn't need anyone besides himself. Teltina gave him a comforting hug. She knew that Rosie wanted to be accepted by everyone. She asked him to be honest, assuring him that as long as he spoke truthfully, she would always be on his side. She promised to accept his honest complaints, loneliness, and even his hatred for the world. She asked him to be her hero. In the present, as the hero Teltina had chosen, Rosie resolved to seize all the magic seeds in the world. Lurgot called him valiant but criticized him for being careless enough to leave his princess defenseless. Teltina was surrounded by Lurgwat's familiars, and Rosie became distracted. He took the attacks while protecting Teltina. Lurgwat mocked Rosie for being inexperienced in protecting others, and decided to make him pay for disrupting the city's order. Rosie urged Teltina to run away and leave him behind, but she reminded him that they still had their friends. Red then appeared, kicking away the familiars attacking Rosie and making a dramatic entrance. Idola used her magic to create a barrier that blocked magic power, allowing Rosie to recover. Rosie asked them to forget about him and focus on getting Teltina to safety instead. He even pushed Red away when she tried to help him, accidentally dropping the Bansu plate. The girls asked why Rosie had it and he couldn't explain. Red then assumed that Rosie wanted to transform into Kizuna Red and excitedly remarked how thrilling it would be for him to become a hero. Teltina asked Rosie to be honest. Rosie admitted that he was afraid of losing his status as a hero because Red was a brave warrior from another world and didn't have any magical powers like him. He planned to remove Red from the picture so no one could take his place in the world, especially with Teltina. Teltina held Rosie's hands tightly and confessed that she also liked him. Idola asked if the story would take long. Despite being royalty, Teltina didn't have a knight because of her low status. Even so, she had a reason to save the world and a mission she needed to complete. She kept struggling until she met Rosie. No matter how promising Red was as a hero, Rosie would always be her hero. She asked him not to think about something sad like her choosing someone else. Red then joined the conversation, sharing that his friend once said bonds were like a sword. They could either be reliable or hurtful. If they could acknowledge each other, they would become stronger and unbreakable. Now that the misunderstanding had been cleared up, Red asked Rosie to form a bond with him, but Rosie quickly refused. No matter what Teltina said, Rosie still felt a sense of incompatibility with Red. Poor Idola was holding out on her own. Rosie explained how he hated looking at Red's face, which resembled that of a passionate hero. The barrier then broke and they were surrounded by enemies. Rosie asked Red to fight while facing the other way. Red said he liked Rosie's stubborn side and finally activated his Bansu set. Teltina praised Idola for enduring and told her not to worry anymore. Red finally transformed into Kizuna Red to stop the evil in front of them. Lurgwat was glad that the barrier was gone so he could crush them with his greatest order. However, Red and Rosie quickly defeated Lurgwat's familiars. The feudal lord was shocked that he couldn't find any weaknesses and was surprised by the heroes' coordination. Both Red and Rosie claimed it was all thanks to the power of their bond. The two closed in on Lurgwat and dealt him significant damage. Despite Red's insistence on their bond, Rosie outright denied it. Idola was pleased that the two were in sync, but Teltina told them to look behind. Lurgwat was starting to be possessed by the magic seed and continued growing larger. Everyone then ran away from the mansion, and Lurgwat soon transformed into a massive monster that even the townspeople and resistance members could see from afar. The monster was as huge as the city and would destroy everything when it fell. Red exclaimed that it was a normal routine for him to fight an enemy who grew larger after being defeated. He brought out the maximum Kizuna Kaiser. Seeing Rosie's shock, Idola and Teltina realized that Rosie had actually formed a bond with Red. They then asked Red what to do since blowing up the giant monster would also destroy the city. Red knew the solution and decided to take Lurgwat to a place where it would be safe to defeat him. Rosie and Teltina were amazed as they saw the area above the clouds. Red had taken the transformed Lurgwat into space. Idola, Teltina, and Rosie were all shocked because, according to their world's legends, there was supposed to be a country above the clouds, which turned out to be a lie. Red exclaimed that he could defeat Lurgwat without hesitation in space. Red then brought out the Great Kizuna Sword and asked Rosie to take control. Although Rosie didn't like being ordered around, she accepted the task. The transformed Lurgwat started preparing to attack, but with the combined efforts of Red and Rosie, they easily defeated Lurgwat with one slash. Lurgwat exploded in space and everyone on the ground witnessed the sight. Soon after, Red expressed his relief that everything had gone well. However, Teltina warned that it wasn't over yet because the magic seed would keep resurrecting and turn into a magical beast when the host was unconscious. To stop it, they would have to either kill the host or remove the magic seed. Red asked how they could do the latter. Teltina then activated something and a huge wolf-like creature emerged from her chest. Idola and Red were shocked. The wolf bit down on Lurgwat and started chewing him. Idola and Red were left confused until the wolf spat Lurgwat out. The magic seed was gone from his hand, and Teltina explained that this was the only way to remove the seed from the host's body and her only duty. Anxious, Red asked who Teltina really was. Meanwhile, from afar, a clown observed that a red one had appeared this time. This clown-like figure with multiple hands planned to hunt down Red for the sake of the Demon King's revival. Afterward, Red and Idola treated themselves to some comfort from Teltina's wolf monster Fluffy Fur. Rosie scolded them, but Teltina assured him it was fine and suggested he join them too. Rosie, however, firmly requested to be patted by Teltina instead. Red then guessed that the wolf was part of Teltina's special magic, and wondered if it was safe to let it roam freely. The wolf, named Vrukolakas, was indeed a special magic created from Teltina's desire to prevent anyone from being hurt and to save the host of the magic seeds without killing them. It could only remove magic seeds and had no fighting abilities. Idola asked why Teltina hadn't told them this earlier. As she retrieved Vrukolakas, Teltina admitted she didn't want them to worry and that her power posed a threat to those who spread the magic seeds. She wanted to keep it a secret as much as possible. Red mentioned that the Kizuna Five also kept their identities hidden from each other. But Red's identity was discovered within just a week. Teltina reminded them not to reveal her power to anyone. However, someone mentioned it was unfortunate that they were too late to hide it. A huge mouth suddenly appeared in midair and spat out black goo. The clown from earlier showed up and introduced himself as Abu Dhabi, a member of the Demon Lord's clan. Everyone except Red was shocked because the Demon Lord's clan were descendants of the Demon Lord, born from it, and they were planning to unseal and revive the Demon Lord. They were basically the evil organization in this world. Idola wondered why they decided to show up now. Abu Dhabi said they appeared to get rid of the pests eating the seeds. He casually admitted that they were responsible for spreading the magic seeds. Teltina suddenly remembered bad experiences and got angry in front of Abu Dhabi because of how many people they had hurt. However, Abu Dhabi didn't care at all. He said that as long as all the seeds bloomed, the world would be filled with negative energy, and their mama, the Demon Lord, would revive to destroy humankind. He claimed some sacrifices were unavoidable and attacked Teltina. Red and Rosie defended Teltina and defeated Abu Dhabi. The clown was surprised that the two heroes still had energy left. Red said he could fight beyond his limits for the sake of his friends thanks to the power of their bonds. Abu Dhabi agreed with Red and decided to call his own allies. Many monsters appeared and began to rampage. Everyone noticed that Grossa and the members of the Resistance had turned into monsters. Abu Dhabi revealed that the Resistance wanted power, so he gave it to them. However, he gave them inferior seeds that caused them to rampage uncontrollably. Red confronted Abu Dhabi, saying he couldn't forgive him. Teltina asked Rosie to help Red, but the hero didn't want to leave his princess's side. Teltina forcefully ordered him to defeat Abu Dhabi, who was responsible for everything. Her violent tone made Rosie tremble in fear. Red and Abu Dhabi continued their battle in mid-air. The clown then brought out a weapon that looked like a sword whip. Red dodged the attack and Abu Dhabi started laughing. He found it amusing that the people who wanted to protect the city were now the monsters destroying everything in sight. He mocked the kind of human bonds Red was talking about. Angered, Red brought out his Kizuna gun and started shooting at Abu Dhabi. The clown claimed he only brought out the people's true desires. Even if he hadn't given them power, they would have eventually done it themselves. He boasted that their bonds were stronger because they wished for the same thing and were connected by a single purpose. He shared how the Demon Lord used to laugh at his jokes, and he had been fighting for 1,000 years just to see her smile again. He couldn't believe a Kizuna Ranger wanted to stop them from reforging their bonds. Rosie told Red not to listen to Abu Dhabi's words. Red understood that every bond was precious and irreplaceable, even for an evil organization. He knew this all too well and it pained him. However, if those bonds harmed others, they were considered evil, and Red decided he would break those bonds himself. Abu Dhabi found it disappointing since he had hoped Red would take his own life out of guilt. Meanwhile, Idola used her magic to defeat the monsters and bring out the unconscious hosts. Teltina then summoned Vrukolakas to feed on the magic seeds. Idola did her best to fight the rampaging magic seeds, but it was too much for her. Teltina was also getting tired as she used up too much magic power. Idola thought about using the sacred sword to absorb the excess magic, but Teltina stopped her, reminding her that Rosie and Red were working together to stop Abu Dhabi. Idola worried about Teltina, but the princess didn't care about her own body as long as they could defeat the clown. Idola could only hope that Red and Rosie would finish quickly. On the other hand, Rosie was struggling to fight Abu Dhabi and his whip-like sword. To make things worse, Abu Dhabi's extra floating hands kept blocking his movements, preventing him from reaching the main body. Rosie had no choice but to work with Red, so he shouted that he would hold Abu Dhabi down for 20 seconds and told Red to defeat the clown within that time. Red was excited about forming a bond with Rosie, but Rosie made it clear that he was giving an order, not a request. Rosie then changed the sacred sword's form to use gravity magic to pin Abu Dhabi down. However, this also placed a heavy burden on Rosie and drained the stored magic power. He hoped Red wouldn't mess things up. Red had brought out the turbo engine and used it to unleash a stronger and faster burning Kizuna punch called Turbo Smash. He believed the floating hands could stop him, but they failed. Abu Dhabi laughed at Red and cast a spell to make him explode. Rosie could only watch helplessly as Red turned into a firework display. Abu Dhabi then dealt with Rosie, leaving both heroes unconscious on the ground. Just as Abu Dhabi decided to hunt down Teltina, Red got back up to stop him. Abu Dhabi expected that an otherworldly hero wouldn't go down easily and brought out a huge weapon that resembled a large flower with hands as petals. He struck with the intent to kill, but at that moment Rosie pushed Red aside and took the hit instead. Red ran to Rosie and asked why he had saved him. Rosie replied that he did it on a whim. Abu Dhabi was impressed since his attack was supposed to reduce Rosie to dust. He noticed that the sacred sword had absorbed most of the magic, weakening the explosion. He found it amusing that someone who was about to die by his hands was trying so hard. Abu Dhabi's words triggered something in Red, reminding him of a time when he had lost someone in front of him. Red's suit began to burn as his anger rose. Without giving Abu Dhabi a chance to speak, Red planted his steel fist on Abu Dhabi's face. Seeing the otherworldly hero getting serious, Abu Dhabi also ignited himself in flames, feeling fully powered up. At that moment, someone arrived and cast a spell that made large octopus tentacles emerge from the ground, trapping everyone in sight. Abu Dhabi recognized whose magic it was. Idola froze and wondered why this person was in the area. The woman who appeared couldn't believe she was seeing the good-for-nothing from the loser family all messed up and called Idola lame. This woman was Shauha Shemazar, the current wand of the royal family. Seeing the kingdom's highest-ranking wizard, Abu Dhabi tried to make an excuse and opened a portal to escape. Shauha tried to stop him and Red joined in, but they were too late. Abu Dhabi successfully got away, leaving both Red and Shauha disappointed. Soon after, Rosie was seen apologizing loudly for leaving Teltina's side. Teltina, who was having her magic power drained by the sacred sword, assured him it was okay. Instead of apologizing, Teltina asked Rosie to wear something. Grossa then thanked Idola for her help, but Idola felt she hadn't done enough. Grossa reassured her that wasn't true and said everyone was grateful for Idola's assistance. Grossa admitted it was also their own fault for gaining power through shortcuts. They promised to restore the city to its former state and invited them to visit again so she could serve them some of her cooking. Idola looked forward to it since Grossa owned the best diner in town. Idola then noticed Red was in a daze the whole time. Red explained that Abu Dhabi sounded like he had fought otherworlders before, and he was curious about it. Idola shared that an otherworld hero had sealed the Demon Lord 1,000 years ago. Although there were documents about it, researchers didn't really believe them. It was safe to assume that the Demon Clan had indeed fought an otherworlder. Red then wondered if the otherworlder had managed to return home, but there were no records of that. Idola then suggested they ask someone who had lived for thousands of years, as they might know what happened to the hero. It was possible that some elves or vampires had that knowledge. Shauha interrupted them, saying she would take Teltina back to the royal palace for treatment. Red asked if Teltina's condition was really that serious. Shauha explained that Teltina's magic seed had grown larger because of the other magic seeds she had absorbed. Idola worried that it would take a long time to reach the imperial capital. Shauha asked what Idola meant, and then casually opened a transfer gate. Idola doubted Shauha could transport them all to the capital at once, but in an instant, Red and Idola found themselves in Avalost, right in front of the magic tower. Shauha welcomed them, though it felt more like a welcome home greeting for Idola. Shortly after, Teltina was successfully treated and Shauha said she would be fine with the prescribed medicine. Shauha had the medicine since she had researched magic seeds herself. However, because the Demon Clan supported her, she couldn't move freely. As expected, many nobles had magic seeds. Shauha agreed that the nobles were competing for the seeds, and most were still unused, kept as backup power in case of emergencies. If the nobles learned that the magic seeds were actually from the Demon Clan, they would quietly hand them over. She advised Red and Idola to stay the night, as the report to the Emperor could wait until Teltina recovered. As Red and Idola were being shown around, Red asked if everyone in the tower were all wizards. Shauha confirmed that they had the best licensed magic researchers, unlike the unlicensed strays. These stray wizards were not affiliated with the tower and were mostly adventurers. It wasn't restricted to learning magic, but to develop magic tools one needed a license. After getting a license, any research paper had to pass the Magic Tower's review before being announced to the world. In short, Shauha managed all the research papers of the wizards. Shauha explained that she had to manage and regulate them through a qualification system. However, Idola doubted her, knowing that Shauha was trying to monopolize both the nobles and the knights. Idola stated that magic technology was originally meant to benefit people who couldn't learn magic, and it should be used by those in need to bring smiles to people's faces. Shauha laughed and called Idola an idiot just like her father. She claimed that the system created by Idola's father had already reached its limit. By spreading magic technology to the masses, low-tier wizards created inferior magic tools, leading to many accidents. Idola argued that the issue couldn't be resolved by imposing restrictions. Shauha then asked if Idola knew how many accidental explosions happened each year due to faulty magic lamps. She also reminded Idola of how poor people attacked a nobleman's house with magic tools. how slave merchants used magic tools to enslave demi-humans, and how orphans were modified by magic tools and turned into murderers and thieves. Xiaoha pointed out that such technology couldn't ensure people's safety. She didn't care about being called a villain and was strict with her qualifications to protect the masses from being exploited by magic tools. She exclaimed that Idola's father had only an ideal, without any sense of reality. Xiaoha wanted to know how someone from another world felt about Idola's dream. Red agreed that it was something difficult to achieve. Idola couldn't believe Red was siding with Xiaoha after he had praised her dream earlier. She felt despair when she heard that the only person who believed in her dream suddenly changed his mind. Just as Red was about to discuss the positive aspects of Idola's dream, she cast a magic spell to leave. She flew away as far as she could, remembering how other wizards had refused to help her restore her family's position and title. They had told her to stop holding on to the past, and their laughter became a painful memory for her. Red caught up to her using a flying Kizuna beast. Idola called him an idiot, angry because she believed that deep down, Red didn't truly believe in her dreams and had dismissed them as childish. Red tackled her and they both crashed onto the snowy field. Idola felt sad because she had thought of Red as her only ally. Red reminded her that he had been on her side since the day they met. Idola said she had just heard Red agreeing with Xiaoha. Red acknowledged that achieving her dream was difficult, but that was all the more reason to make it a reality. When he first heard about Idola's dream, he wanted it to come true, even though he knew it would be hard to achieve. He explained that one person's power is limited, which is why bonds between people exist. Idola knew Red would bring that up. Red suggested that they needed to work with many people to bring happiness to others. He asked Idola to be flexible and open to understanding other people's perspectives. He also mentioned that Xiaoha's qualification system wasn't wrong. Red explained that in his world, qualifications were necessary to handle dangerous situations and maintain order by enforcing rules. Idola, realizing that safety was also important, agreed that Xiaoha's system wasn't entirely wrong, but felt that her approach was too extreme. Red agreed, saying that being too restrictive was going overboard. Idola then realized the importance of educating people on how to handle things properly to reduce or prevent accidents. Red encouraged Idola to discuss these ideas with Xiaoha, believing that combining their ideas could improve the world. Idola reminded Red that Xiaoha was her family's enemy. Red responded by saying that this was even more reason to form a bond with Xiaoha since achieving her dream that way would be a victory. He offered to help Idola build a bond with Xiaoha to make her dreams come true. As Idola reflected on how shocked she had been by Red's words earlier, she realized she was actually in love with him. Later that night, Idola took a bath while holding a mana medal, wondering how it could help people. She excused herself to continue researching it. Despite her efforts, she still couldn't figure out how it had crystallized in the first place. Normally, magic ores formed when magic power settled in a vein of ore, which could then be used as fuel for magic tools or to amplify one's magic. Even though she could feel the magic power from it, Idola couldn't use or alter it. Its mystery reminded her of Red and his abilities. She tried calling out Red's name aloud and suddenly the mana metal shone brightly. To her shock, Red appeared in the bath and both of them screamed at the top of their lungs. A minute ago, Red met up with Rosie on a balcony. Red thanked Rosie for saving him earlier, but Rosie said it was just on a whim. Still, it didn't change the fact that Rosie had saved him. Suddenly, Rosie heard a different voice telling him not to do it again. Surprised, he asked if Red had spoken. Red quickly changed the subject and asked why Rosie was outside. Rosie looked up at the sky and thought about space. They had been taught that above the skies was a land where souls, gathered by angels, lived. He never expected it to be just a vast emptiness. However, it was a beautiful sight that didn't make sense. Red agreed that it was a touching scene. Rosie then noticed that Red was glowing like a lamp. Red realized it was the emergency Kizuna warp. Then Red suddenly disappeared, leaving Rosie confused. In the present, Idola and Red were panicking inside a bathroom. Red explained how the emergency Kizuna warp worked as one of the features of the Bansu bracelet. However, to activate that function, there needed to be strong Kizuna energies between two bracelets. Idola finally understood that the mana metal was related to Kizuna energy and that the mana was actually part of it. Red then asked if Idola was done with her bath. Later, Red shared that Professor Petagoras, who created the Bansu bracelet and Bansu beasts, explained how the bonding of atoms, which creates everything, was also the power of bonds. It was a universal power that governed the creation of all things. Idola understood that the suits and weapons were made from Kizuna energy, but she wanted more explanation about the teleportation. Red assumed that if two people had a strong bond, the nature of their bond would allow their bodies to break down to the size of atoms and then reconstruct at the target's location. Idola found the thought frightening, but realized it was something Red could use to return to his original world. Red said he had tried, but it wasn't strong enough to break through the world's barriers. However, since Red had been sent to her world, Idola suggested that the two worlds might now be connected. The ore in her world contained Kizuna energy, the mysterious power that had brought Red over. Knowing it had the power to warp reality, Idola decided to thoroughly investigate the connections between Red, the Kizuna energy, and the mana metals. She claimed she wouldn't let Red sleep on her. The next morning in the Imperial Castle, Teltina noticed that Red and Idola were acting awkwardly around each other. One of them felt awkward because he had seen everything the other could show, while the other realized she had just confessed her feelings and revealed everything she had. Teltina understood what was going on and casually asked if the two had done Bansu fusion the previous night. She assumed that was the reason for the awkwardness, but Idola asked what Bansu fusion even meant, and told her to stop using such words. Xiaoha couldn't believe they were talking about something inappropriate in the audience chamber. Soon after, Teltina led everyone to greet her father, Emperor Gaudus. The Emperor welcomed her back, but the first prince, Dariel, and the Imperial Knights captain, Regulus, didn't look happy to see her return. Gaudus confirmed he had received the report on the magic seeds and the appearance of the demon clan. Since the demon lord was involved, he ordered everyone who had the magic seeds to destroy them immediately. He also asked Teltina to stop risking herself outside the castle. Teltina said there were still others who would crave power and wouldn't follow his orders. Besides, only her special magic could deal with the seeds planted in human bodies. She wanted to continue her journey to collect the magic seeds from those who would ignore the Imperial Order. Gaudus couldn't help but agree. Red was glad that the Emperor was kind, but Idola claimed he was at least. At that moment, Dariel asked if it was a good idea to get rid of something useful. Gaudus mentioned that, according to the report, the seeds could bring back the Demon Lord. Dariel said they could easily defeat the Demon Lord since they had the hero with the sacred sword. He suggested using the magic seeds to strengthen their army, defeat the demi-human alliances, and unite the world. Teltina then interrupted him, reminding him that the Demon Clan could control the seeds. Knowing that, adding the seeds to their arsenal would be a bad move. Dariel argued that they could alter the seeds so the Demon Clan couldn't control them and asked Xiaoha about it. Xiaoha confirmed that they could use the seeds until they had full control. She was already running an experiment and it was progressing well. Idola was shocked. Dariel insisted that the royal wand had already helped and asked Gaudus to change the order from destroy to confiscate. The emperor quickly agreed. He then ordered Dariel and Xiaoha to make use of the confiscated seeds, while Teltina would deal with those who wouldn't comply with the imperial order. Dariel asked Teltina not to tarnish their name while traveling. Teltina told him not to worry. Seeing his tomboyish sister change, Dariel wondered if Teltina was trying to become Artio. Teltina froze and said she could never be her brother's substitute. Here's the passage rewritten in the past tense with simpler terms. Meanwhile, Idola confronted Xiaoha and asked if she was really altering the seeds to strengthen the army. Xiaoha claimed she couldn't disobey the orders, but she would try to make the changes safe for humans. Idola then gave her a paper listing ways to improve Xiaoha's qualification system. Idola knew her ideals wouldn't change the world, but she believed people would suffer if magic tools were taken away. She suggested they could work together, combining her ideals with Xiaoha's management to make people happy. However, Xiaoha called her foolish, though her prideful self knew she wasn't wrong. Still, if Idola's goal was to win her favor, Xiaoha offered her a task to complete. Idola tried to refuse, but Xiaoha insisted it would also benefit her. Soon after, Idola and the others were on their way to a place called Sun Forest, where the ancient elves lived, who had recently been in conflict with humans. Red then realized it was a place where they could find information about the hero from 1,000 years ago. Also, there was an elf among them who could use a mysterious power, and they needed to investigate that. Red doubted they would find an elf in the desert. However, the elves' sanctuary turned out to be a place shaped like a giant cactus. The area used to be a forest with trees, but the Demon Lord had turned it into a dry desert. Finally, everyone could take off their robes and feel cool. The boys were happy to see the girls in new outfits. Idola got pricked by a cactus thorn, and Red made a fuss, worried she might get an infection. He put a bandage on the wound on Idola's finger. However, Idola was too embarrassed to speak, as the bandage looked like a wedding ring to her. She suddenly overheated, and Red suggested she take off her hat. Teltina remarked that the heat was coming from Idola's heart. Just then, a strong elf swung in like Tarzan and kidnapped Idola. Red quickly transformed and chased after the afro-haired elf. Teltina tried to follow them, but elves with bows and arrows blocked the way. The elves asked why humans were in their forest, and Rosie demanded they hand over the mysterious power they possessed. The elves realized the group was after something or someone called Amun, and began shooting arrows. Furious that arrows were aimed at Teltina's beautiful legs, Rosie went on a rampage and created a tornado to blow the elves away. He then threatened one of the elves and asked where Amun was. Suddenly, someone yelled at them to stop and started cursing at Rosie. Her name was Rania. Seeing her friends injured and the forest damaged, she decided to fight back. She brought out a medal that made sounds like the Bansu bracelet. Rosie and Teltina were shocked as they watched Rania place the activated magic tool on her bag. Rania then transformed into something that resembled a Kizuna Ranger with sphinx-like designs. Rosie and Teltina realized that the elves had a power similar to Red's from another world. Rania then introduced herself as Amun, the guardian of the sun. Meanwhile, Idola cried out for Red's help as the Afro elf kept hitting her. Red couldn't catch up to them, so Idola decided to use the mana metal to call Red over. With the emergency Kizuna warp, Red appeared in front of the shocked Afro elf and tied him up with bandage-like things. Red was glad they succeeded. The Afro elf then started protesting, saying they wouldn't give the power of Amun to the humans. Red wondered what Amun was. Like Kizuna Ranger, Rania introduced herself as Amun. Teltina saw it was the same as Red and realized the elves weren't using the magic seeds. Rania got offended and told them not to compare the power of Amun with evil power. She attacked and exclaimed that her power was sacred, left behind by the first Amun to protect their forest. She explained the first Amun was a warrior from another world who once fought with the Demon Lord. Realizing they weren't enemies, Teltina asked Rania to stop, saying their only goal was to collect the magic seeds and they wouldn't take the power of Amun. However, Rania claimed they had already stepped onto their lands without permission, hurt her friends, and damaged the forest. Rosie could only defend against Rania's speed and power, and asked if she would also bring out her golem. Rania didn't know what Rosie was talking about. Rosie realized Rania didn't have the interdimensional power like Red, and started draining power from Rania. Rania backed off, calling Rosie a pervert. She then brought out another medal with a scarab image and activated it. She changed forms, now with huge gauntlets. Rania didn't hesitate to bring out a sun-like flaming ball and threw it toward Rosie. With his magic-draining sword, Rosie confidently sliced the fireball in half. However, there were 4 more, and Rosie got overwhelmed. He prioritized saving Teltina and tried to escape. Rania activated another M-doll and transformed into a falcon-like suit. She didn't want them to escape, so she switched her suit to combat mode. Feather-like bullets shot from her wings, attacking Rosie and Teltina. Rosie tried to block the attacks, and Rania took that opportunity to strike. Rosie and Teltina fell to the ground, and Rosie urged Teltina to run while he held off Rania to buy some time. Rosie then activated the most powerful form of his sword and put everything he had into a single attack. Rania did the same, reverting to her Sphinx form and launching a kick with a pyramid. At that moment, Red shouted at the top of his lungs, asking them to stop fighting. He intervened, stopping the attacks from both sides after transforming into Kizuna Red. Rania looked shocked when she saw Red. He exclaimed that the real enemies were the humans fighting the elves, not the elves themselves. Rosie complained that Rania wasn't listening, but Teltina also blamed Rosie. Rania then undid her transformation, looking surprised. Idola noticed her and realized she was using the same power as Red. She asked Red if Rania was his friend, but Red explained that what Rania was using was entirely different from the Kizuna 5. Rania then asked if Red was the legendary Red Warrior from their prophecies. She and the other elves bowed down together. Rania asked for forgiveness and punishment, but also for Red's help in saving the forest. Red asked her what she meant. Rania led Red and the others to the inner village called Lugsim. The village was peaceful with many cactus-like houses and friendly elves. Rania officially introduced herself as the new chieftain and the 7th successor of Amun. Rosie and Teltina were shocked by Rania's change in personality. Rania apologized and explained that she was usually timid and would hide it by switching to her battle persona. She said she couldn't fight when she felt shy. Despite her cute act, she insisted on discussing the main topic. She showed everyone a mural with a large image of someone who looked like Red. Red was taken aback. Rania explained that it was the prophecy left by the prophet, who had traveled with the hero 1,000 years ago. Red broke into a cold sweat upon hearing the name prophet. According to the prophecy, when a great disaster approached the forest, a red warrior from another dimension would come to stop the disaster and bring peace. This disaster might be connected to Azir, the lord of Kukuja, who owned magic seeds. Kukuja was a city that thrived on mining magic ores, but a few years earlier, the city lord was killed in a rebellion. Azir, the former lord's son, took over. Azir had a special type of magic that allowed him to turn anything he touched into sand and control sand at will. He once invaded the elves' forest. The elves had previously had a good relationship with Kukuja, but Azir's greed destroyed that. Rania described how they fought back, but in a place full of sand, Azir's power was overwhelming. Even with Amun's help, they could barely stop his invasion. Azir threatened to turn everything and everyone into sand if they didn't hand over Amun's power and become his slaves. After making this threat, he left, and the elves realized they didn't have the strength to fight him off. Although Rania knew that Red was not connected to them and was not obligated to help, she still asked for his assistance. Red quickly agreed without hesitation. It didn't matter to him if they had just met or were from different races. If someone was in trouble, he would help. Tela realized that since magic seeds were involved, they would also join the fight. However, Rosie still felt defeated by Ranya's situation. Red encouraged everyone, saying they needed to work together to protect the forest. Red then asked Ranya what the prophet looked like. Ranya only knew that the prophet was the hero's companion, and if anyone knew more, it would be her grandmother, who had lived for thousands of years. However, her grandmother had been sleeping for the past 100 years and might not wake up for a long time. Idola wondered why Red was more interested in the prophet than Amun's power. Red claimed he might have an idea about who the prophet was. Idola could see how serious Red was. Outside the forest, 3 magic seed bearers appeared. Azir, along with 2 others, decided to hunt the elves down. Shortly after, a young elf demonstrated engraving magic, a technique passed down through generations of elves. Idola noticed that engraving a lightweight mark on the rock made it easier to lift. Engraving magic was used by elves in their daily lives, and Idola was shocked to realize they were essentially creating magical tools. Ranya quietly watched them exchange ideas until Red suddenly appeared, causing her to become flustered and act more formally. Red asked why she looked lonely while watching them, and Ranya explained that they reminded her of a human friend she once had. Red wondered if it was Azir, as Ranya seemed sad when the other elves mentioned his name. Ranya shared that they used to talk a lot whenever her father took her to Kukuja in the past. They became friends easily since both were future leaders of their respective city and town. However, Ranya said she set aside her personal feelings to fight him as the guardian of the forest. Red agreed but suggested they might reconcile afterward. Ranya insisted that it was impossible because once they became enemies, there was no way they could regain their friendship. Red agreed that it might not have been possible, but he said that clashing with others could create much stronger and more solid bonds. He shared how he was once forced to fight his best friend, turning them into enemies. They fought hard against each other, but during that battle they came to understand each other's thoughts. Afterward, they managed to rebuild a bond that was stronger than ever before. No matter how many times a bond broke, it could always be rebuilt with anyone. He suggested they figure out what Azir was thinking after they defeated him. Ranya found Red to be mysterious yet strangely reassuring. While watching the two talk, Idola's eyes darkened and she bit her lips until they bled. Tela noticed how the legal wife acted but got distracted by a card that suddenly flew toward her. When she touched it, Tela was pulled into the card. The other elves in the area were also being sucked into cards. Idola warned them about this. At that moment, someone praised the elves for looking good even as cards. Azir's companion, who had a magic seed and privilege-type magic, appeared. Ranya quickly flipped and cursed the intruder. Azir then arrived riding his other companion who had wings. He was surprised that Ranya still had the same habit of switching personas. Ranya asked what Azir was doing since his dream and goal had been to make humans and demi-humans coexist. Azir claimed his goal hadn't changed. The elves became angry, reminding him that he was trying to take away the power of Amun. Azir reminded them about the Kukuja rebellion. The elves had been given special treatment at first, which upset the humans, who believed the previous lord favored the elves. This led to a revolt. Ranya remembered how many people had died, but also recalled Azir's promise to solve the issue by working together. Azir said that no matter what he did, there would always be those who prioritized their own kind and caused trouble. He believed that freedom made coexistence difficult, so he decided to take absolute power and control everyone equally to achieve perfect coexistence. He vowed to treat both elves and humans equally, and asked Ranya to obey him, promising to free the elves trapped in the cards. Ranya felt disappointed, thinking Azir was talking nonsense. Azir sighed. To snap Azir out of it, Red and Ranya activated their transforming gears, turning into Kizuna Red and Sphinx. The card holder reminded them that he had hostages, but suddenly Rosie appeared behind him, raging to save Tela and the others by killing the caster. Azir asked the card holder Uges to handle Rosie. Then he told Red and Ranya to continue their fight at the Udo Ruins and flew away. Ranya activated a camel badge and surprisingly, a motorbike appeared. She asked Red to join her, but Red hesitated, worried about the people who were sealed. Rosie told him to go, saying he could save Tela on his own. Idola also urged Red to go, reminding him that he was the prophesied hero. Hearing that, Red agreed, got on the motorbike and left with Ranya. Uges wondered if they were finished talking and complained that his job of stalling everyone except Red and Ranya was done. Rosie asked him to speak more slowly, but Uges said he was just talking to himself. Rosie then rushed forward and ordered Uges to bring out Tela. Uges activated his privilege-type magic and claimed that his card's power wasn't just limited to sealing. He then unsealed a huge sandworm. Rosie was shocked and got swallowed by it. Idola realized the urgency of taking down the caster and chanted a fire-based magic attack. To her surprise, Yuga's cards could also absorb magic attacks. He was pleased to get a high-quality magic card and returned the attack to Idola. Idola called Yugis's magic troublesome. Yugis agreed and showed off his collection of beautiful women. Idola found him disgusting, but Yugis told her to shut up. He said he would only release the elves later as ordered by Azir, but not the humans. He was happy at the thought of adding a well-endowed beauty like Idola to his collection, along with the princess. When Rosie saw Yuge licking Teltina's card, he got angry and managed to escape from the sandworm to cut off Yugis's tongue. Yugis laughed as Rosie triggered his trap card, causing a huge trap to appear and bind Rosie. A card then touched Rosie and started sucking him in. Before disappearing, Rosie ordered Idola to do whatever she could to save Teltina. Rosie finally turned into a card, and Yugis was surprised to discover that he was actually a hero who bore a sacred sword. However, Yugis didn't need him since Rosie was a man. Idola noticed that Rosie had only thought of Teltina until his final moment. Thanks to Rosie's persistence, Idola saw a path to victory. She invoked a wind-based spell to charge forward. Yugis complained about how straightforward and repetitive Idola's moves were. Idola knew that Yugis wouldn't hurt her because he wanted her in his collection. She realized she wasn't completely protected by the magic that had just returned. Yugis's obsession with collecting was revealed, and he decided to use the extra cards as a giant wall to shield himself. However, Idola didn't attack the wall of cards. Instead, she suddenly disappeared. She reappeared by drilling up from the ground. Unfortunately, Yugis had a pile of cards hidden under his clothes for protection. Taking advantage of the situation, Yugis trapped Idola inside one of his cards. Idola struggled, but Yugis only laughed. He celebrated having obtained a high-quality card. The elves who were watching grew anxious since both the human hero and the great wizard had been defeated. Yuge wondered if he was the strongest now that he had defeated the top humans. He believed he could also defeat Azir and take the elves' paradise away from him. Surprisingly, Idola started speaking while in card form and asked if Yugis could really do what he planned. From that distance, Idola launched a magic attack at Yugis's face. Shocked, Yugis asked how Idola managed to cast magic from inside the card. Idola explained that before she was fully trapped in the card, she left an explosion mark on it. She came up with the plan after seeing Rosie grab the edge of the card a few minutes earlier. Yugis couldn't believe Idola had let herself get captured on purpose. Idola's last two attacks had just been tricks to get closer. Yugis called her plan to blow up the card ridiculous. Idola apologized and mentioned that she had plenty of experience with close-range explosions thanks to Red. Yugis then fell to the ground unconscious, which caused the people sealed in his cards to be released. Later, Teltina smiled as she ordered Rikolakas to chew slowly, suggesting that Yugis was being slowly tortured. She then wondered how things were going for Ranya. Idola assured her it would be fine since Red was with Ranya. Meanwhile, at the Udo Ruins, a disappointed Azir couldn't believe there was a limit to what the two could do with their otherworldly powers. Red was buried in the sand, and Ranya was tightly held by a huge monster. Ranya and Red had just arrived at the Udo Ruins when someone tried to stop Red because only Amun or Ranya were allowed inside. Azir's henchman then transformed by using his Chimera magic. However, with the combined strength of Red's burning Kizuna punch and Ranya's camel motorbike gimmick, the Chimera was defeated instantly. Meanwhile, a man named Vidon informed Azir that both Gimmick and Yugis had been defeated. Azir said that the mercenaries had already done their best. He assured Vidon that he would fight Ranya to the fullest without harming the elves' forest. Vidon complained about how Azir avoided casualties in such a roundabout way, sighing as he felt tired of being a butler. Azir reminded Vidon that he was the one who had given him the magic seed. Vidon smiled and decided to return to Kukuja to stop being a nuisance. He wished Azir luck before teleporting away using the shadows. Azir then resolved to do whatever it took to stand above everyone else. At that moment, Ranya appeared and angrily called out to Azir. Azir complained about how Ranya was always hot-headed when she wore the mask. He then activated his privilege-type magic and used the nearby sand to create massive hands. He clapped them together, trapping Red and Ranya, and broke the camel motorbike. A huge sand monster called Uath appeared, and Red was shocked to see that the motorbike had turned into sand. The area around them also transformed into an antlion's nest, created by Azir's Uath. Azir explained to Red that Uath could turn things into sand and control the sand at the same time. He claimed that any place full of sand was his domain and then took in a strange candy. Red used his turbo engine to fly out of the sand and tried to punch Azir from above. Azir used Uath to defend himself and attempted to turn Red into sand. Red protected himself by stacking his Bansu bandages. He then punched the stacked bandages, which damaged Uath. Azir realized that Red's quick plan was working. Ranya reminded Azir not to forget about her and activated her suit's jackal mode. She told Azir that even though he could control the desert sand, his body was still human. In jackal mode, Ranya moved so quickly that it looked like she had clones as she attacked Uath. She believed that the sand couldn't follow her if she was fast enough. Azir then activated one of Uath's skills called Led Abad. Everything stopped. including Red and Rania, except for Azir. Azir felt like he was stopping time like Dio. He calmly walked past the two, and in an instant Uoth brought them down. He felt disappointed, thinking their otherworldly powers were weak. Red and Rania didn't know what had just happened, but it felt like time had stopped for them. Red got up and pointed out that Azir's power couldn't turn living things into sand. Azir confirmed this but made it clear that he wouldn't lose as long as he had Uoth's lead abad. With a sad expression, Azir asked them to give up quietly. Rania noticed something about Azir. Red refused to give up, but his burning passion was interrupted by another monster. Azir felt confused about why a magical beast had appeared. However, Red noticed that it was actually Gimmick. When Azir asked what he meant, Red explained that once the host of a magic seed was defeated or surpassed the host's power capacity, it would transform into a magical beast. Feeling the urgency, Red called out the Kizuna beast, Free D, a robot that looked like a T-Rex. Free D bit off the magical beast's head, but it only turned into sand. Red realized they needed Teltina's help, or the transformed Gimmick would just keep reviving. Rania knew she had to do something and broke free from Uoth's grasp. She asked Red to bring Gimmick toward the forest while she talked to Azir one more time. Red then summoned the flying Kizuna beast and dragged Gimmick away with him. Rania asked Azir if he understood that magic seeds were dangerous. Azir claimed he had known from the beginning, as he understood that achieving his goals would require some sacrifices. Uoth continued attacking, and Rania fought back. She exclaimed that Azir would turn into a monster if he didn't stop. Azir insisted he wouldn't lose to anyone, not even to the magic seeds. Rania tried to convince him once more, but Azir pointed out that Rania's usual tone was returning. Rania was surprised. Azir could see that she was still the same as when they first met. Rania disagreed and confessed that Azir had changed her. 12 years earlier, Azir, who was next in line to become the feudal lord of Kukuja City, introduced himself to Rania, the future successor of Amun. Azir, hoping they could get along as fellow future leaders, was met with cold silence from Rania. Concerned, he asked if he had done something wrong, wondering if he had been too informal with her. He had heard that elves had long lifespans and thought that a young-looking elf like Rania might be as old as his grandmother. He wondered if she was upset because he had spoken to her so casually. Rania insisted she wasn't angry and explained that elves no longer lived long lives after the demon lord had withered the sacred tree. Without the tree's blessings, elves now lived only slightly longer than humans. Azir, intrigued by her story, asked to hear more about the elves, but Rania excused herself, saying she had to train. Azir, puzzled by the encounter, decided to follow Rania to the elves' forest, remembering that his father had advised him to befriend her. As he wandered around, a mask fell on him and he recognized it as the one Rania had been wearing. He climbed a cactus tree and found Rania sound asleep on one of the branches. Azir was stunned by her beauty. Rania suddenly woke up and screamed, causing both of them to fall from the tree. Frantically, she searched for her mask. Azir showed it to her, and when she tried to grab it back, he playfully dodged her. Seeing Rania trembling and in tears, Azir realized how different her demeanor was from before. He handed back the mask, and Rania quickly put it on, angrily scolding Azir for taking it. Azir kept teasing Rania by taking away her masks and asking why she needed them. Rania admitted that she was actually shy and not very strong-willed. She explained that people said she wasn't fit to be Amun's successor and told her to wear the masks. When she wore them, she felt like she could become a calmer version of herself or even a warrior. Azir realized that the masks were a tool to change her personality. As someone who would also lead others one day, he wasn't sure what kind of personality would be best for Rania. However, he admitted that he preferred Rania's true self without the masks. Rania was surprised and said that without the masks, she was just a crybaby. Azir agreed but pointed out that she was much cuter without the strange masks. Azir had a way with words. He didn't care if she was timid or weak-willed because he saw it as a sign of Rania's hidden kindness and sense of responsibility. He encouraged her to be herself and grow stronger in that way. Azir was confident that everyone would accept Rania without the mask. Rania wasn't sure how to begin, so Azir offered to practice talking with her without the mask. Rania asked Azir to wake up, knowing him as someone destined to rule with power. There was a time when a young Azir felt jealous seeing a more confident Rania talking to others. Even though Azir had a carefree nature, Rania knew he had a kind heart. She couldn't fight or hunt without wearing her mask, but Azir was always there to pat her back and encourage her. Rania reminded Azir of his goal of bringing coexistence to the world, and promised she would help in any way she could. However, if Azir's ideals turned him evil, Rania vowed to stop him no matter what. She used a powerful kick, but Azir stopped time with Larabad. If Rania could stop him, Azir wanted her to do it for him. Soon after, Red returned to the ruins with the others and found Azir holding Amun's power, with Rania unconscious. Idola quickly used healing magic to revive her. Red, filled with anger, cursed at Azir. Azir then activated Amun's power and transformed into Amun himself just as he had wanted. Red and the others were surprised. Azir finally felt the otherworldly power he had only heard about before. Rania regained consciousness and asked Red to stop Azir. Red assured her he would handle it and went to face the transformed Azir, now Amun. After a brief silence, the two exchanged blows without words or warning. In the past, Azir received complaints from his people because they felt they got fewer benefits compared to the elves, even though they risked their lives in the mines. Azir sighed and reminded them it was all thanks to the elves who could safely blast open the mines using their magic. However, everyone kept complaining about the unfair treatment and even mentioned rumors that he was in a romantic relationship with Rania, the daughter of the elves' chief. Later, Azir met with his father and discussed how Shauha had banned the use of magical tools like magic minecarts and excavation golems. Afterward, Azir's father Beluga asked about the progress between Azir and Rania. Azir claimed they were just good friends, but Beluga doubted this since they were always together. He warned Azir to take action or risk being stuck in the friend zone forever. Beluga didn't mind if Azir married someone from another race. In fact, he had already talked with Rania's father, Ravan, about it. He believed the two could become a bridge between their races. Although he wasn't forcing anything, he simply wished for their happiness. Azir hoped he could create a world where he and Rania could laugh together. Back in the present, after exchanging some punches, Red drew his sword, and Azir activated Amun's Jackal mode. Idola could see the clash of otherworldly powers. However, the system voices from the two were as annoying as Discord and Instagram notifications going off at the same time. Red exclaimed that Rania had been suffering and grieving when she was forced to fight Azir, yet she still wanted to make peace with him. Since Azir had hurt Rania, Red decided to teach him a lesson. He instructed Azir to apologize to Rania later and to make things right. Azir then confessed that he never wanted to hurt Rania either. However, he had gained the power to change the world, and no matter how difficult or painful it was, he felt he had no choice but to use it. Surprisingly, Azir was still able to use his special privilege-type magic and summoned Uath. Rosie joined the fight to take on Uath. He asked Red to hurry up and end their noisy battle. Red felt relieved that he had a friend he could rely on, but Rosie corrected him, saying they were just strangers with the same goal and destination. With the Sacred Sword hero involved, Azir found the situation troublesome. He activated Amun's crocodile mode, surrounded himself with a pyramid, and then burst out of it, grabbing Red with a huge pincer-like right hand that looked like a crocodile's jaws. Azir jumped higher and Rania exclaimed that the next move would be dangerous for Red. Azir then slammed Red to the ground, and the crocodile's mouth closed, biting Red hard. Red was seriously injured and Idola tried to save him. Azir activated Lair Abad and Idola finally understood what Red had warned them about, but she could still think clearly even though she was immobilized. However, she noticed something sticky around her and remembered that Azir had claimed his power was to control sand. Azir declared that it was his duty, as the one who gained power, to control everyone equally with absolute power. Looking back to the past, we see Kukuja mineworkers arming themselves and rioting, marching toward the Lord's mansion. Beluga told Azir to run away, as he would try to negotiate with the rioting workers, assuming they would calm down afterward. Azir offered to help, but Beluga reminded him that he was the feudal lord. Azir believed there were still things he could do on his own. Just then, the rioters burst in and found Beluga. A guard dragged Azir away as Beluga tried to calm the angry mob. Instead, they accused him of being a heretic who supported the elves, and one of them threw a trident into Beluga's stomach. Azir could only watch helplessly as his father died that night. Soon after, Rania offered to share Azir's pain through a letter. The citizens continued to speak badly about Azir because he kept asking the elves for help. They also blamed the riot on Azir's closeness to the elves. Knowing that someone like Azir would become the next feudal lord, they worried for their city. It was then that Azir decided to use absolute power to suppress the people and prevent another tragedy. He wished for a power that could control everyone equally. At that moment, Vidon appeared, claiming that such power could help Azir achieve his ideals. He introduced himself as Azir's butler, shocking the young man. Azir's eyes became clouded as if he were being possessed or brainwashed. Vidon then brought out a magic seed saying it was the power that could help Azir fulfill his wish. He urged Azir to take it and control everyone equally. Azir decided to strip away any power that could spark a rebellion, including powers from another world. While Lurabad was activated, Azir was unexpectedly attacked by the power of the Sacred Sword. He was completely shocked and couldn't believe Rosie could still move under Larabad's influence. Rosie stood proudly, claiming it was because he was Teltina's hero. Idola corrected him, saying it was actually the Sacred Sword's power. Azir, confused, asked what that meant. Idola then explained that she had figured out how Azir's power worked. What he had stopped wasn't them or the world, but the Sands time that was clinging to them. Unfortunately for Azir, he wasn't Dio enough. Red suddenly became curious about what Idola meant. Idola quickly explained that their bodies, full of sand, couldn't move like rocks because Azir was controlling the sand, keeping it in place. The reason Rosie could move was due to the sacred sword's power absorbing the sticky sand. Red didn't fully understand but was relieved to know they could win thanks to Rosie. Azir was surprised to learn that Lair Abad actually had a natural enemy. He couldn't believe that someone was standing in his way of achieving his ideals. He then activated Amun's Pharaoh mode and transformed. He exclaimed that all he wanted was for humans and demi-humans to coexist peacefully. Red responded that Azir's ideals weren't wrong, but his method of trying to do everything alone was. He reminded Azir that Rania had wanted to help him achieve his goals. Red was confident they could have persuaded everyone together since many people around the world shared the same desire for coexistence. He told Azir that instead of relying on the power of the magic seeds, he should have trusted in something much stronger, like the bonds between many people as Red had. Azir was stunned and couldn't respond. Red insisted it wasn't too late to stop. However, at that very moment, Azir began screaming in pain as dark, murky power started pouring out of him. In a creepy voice, he said there was no turning back. Teltina realized that Azir's mind was being taken over by the magic seed. Azir then declared that he would destroy anyone who stood in his way, and that he could still achieve his ideal with the people who remained. Azir activated the most powerful technique that Amun possessed, and with a single kick, multiple pyramids appeared and charged toward Red and the others. Red had brought out the maximum Kaiser Buster and asked everyone to gather around him. He said they would break Azir's ideals, which had gone out of control, with the strength of their strong bonds. Everyone held the Kaiser Buster together and fired a perfect shot to destroy the incoming pyramids. Azir, however, did not give up and demanded more power. As he asked for it, the magic seed began to move on its own and started taking over Azir's body. Everyone was shocked as a violent sandstorm appeared. The sandstorm moved like a living creature and headed toward the elves' forest. Idola guessed it was drawn to the place where a lot of magic gathered and that they needed to stop it. Rania then called out to Red, saying she had heard Azir asking for help before he turned into the sandstorm monster. She cried and asked Red for help. Red asked what Rania meant and suggested they rescue Azir together. Rania felt confused about what to do since she no longer had Amun. It turned out Red's plan was to have the other four ride and pilot the Kizuna beasts like the Kizuna 5. They all flew toward the Sun Forest in advance. With all slots now full, he could perform the Bansu fusion in another world with 5 pilots. He then brought out the maximum Kizuna Kaiser to stop the rampaging sandstorm, confident that they would save both Azir and the Sun Forest. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 12. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.